being of Indian descent is something that really impacts me in my music journey as a Western musician. And it's something that I really want, I've really been digging deep into recently as I started studying music. So I really thank you all for being here. I'm going to pass it off to Pia Satana, who is the president of ACDA.
Thank you so much, Muskan. First of all, I want to say so much thank you to Muskan for putting this panel discussion together. This is the final panel discussion of the ACDA Speaker Series season of 2020 to 2021. I am the outgoing president, and Ginger Pearsall right here will be the next president for ACDA. She'll be taking over the mantle. And so I just want to say congratulations, Muskan, on this wonderful panel, and I wish you all the best luck, and thank you to all the panelists for being here. Ginger?
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Muskan. I am so proud that our organization is able to host this event. And I really do want to also thank Muskan for putting in an incredible amount of time and effort to bring together this presentation. And of course, also, I wanted to thank our panelists for taking the time to share their experiences with us today. I really look forward to what today's conversation will hold.
All right, thank you so much. So first of all, I'm going to be introducing all of our wonderful panelists today. So first up, I'm going to introduce Suman Prabhakar. He is actually my uncle. So Suman, uncle, please, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are right now, the music that you create and perform.
Hi, I'm Dr. Suman Prabhakar. By profession, I'm a veterinarian, and first part of my life, I was raised in India till age 27, 28, and then immigrated to America. And I've been a general practitioner in Los Angeles for a small animal practice. And on top, one day a week on Tuesday nights, I'm a semi-priest in the temple, so where I perform the services for the Tuesday event. And it involves mostly singing. And to my credit, I have one composition of Shri Ram Stuti in Rag Bairagi Bhairav. And surprisingly, as tough it sounds, all the devotees, they can sing with me. So that's how much people can acquire and learn about any new style of music. And Muskan is my niece, musical niece. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, next, I would like to introduce Priti Paintal. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so as you probably gather, I'm in the UK, and I came from India to study music, and I went to the Royal Northern College of Music. Well, I first went to York and I studied there, and then I went to Royal Northern College of Music to study composition. And yeah, my family is still in India. I've got an uncle who's now passed away, but he was an Indian classical musician. My mum was a classical pianist. She used to broadcast for All India Radio. So I got both. I got the Western classical and I got the Indian classical from a very early age. And I started to compose when I was about 15, 16. I was determined to be a composer. Had no clue how to go about it. And then I got a British Council scholarship to come to the UK, and that's where I've been. I think my family is still waiting for me to come back to India, but 30 years on, I don't think that's going to happen. So now I'm in the UK, quite well settled, and have got my own ensemble, which is Shivanova, which brings together cross-cultural musicians from all sorts, from India, Chinese as well, African, jazz, and we create our own music. And I also promote, as you probably heard, I promote a lot of other world music in this country. So yep, that's a very brief sort of synopsis of what I do.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, next I would love to introduce Joshua Anand Slater.
Hi, I am a conductor and I'm based in New York City. I've also been quite active as a composer and arranger, mostly arranger, and as a church musician. And I was born in the US to one Indian parent and one American. So I'm I'm a beige baby, like some of you. and I am actively composing and conducting and, scrabbling around. There's always a pile of scores about 10 feet out of camera shot that I should have studied and haven't studied yet, which is the way of the conductor. That's about it for me.
All right, thank you so much. And next is Gitanjali Mathur.
Hi, thanks Muskan for having me here. I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm a singer by profession. I was originally born in Rajasthan in India, but my mother is from Tamil Nadu and in the south of India, and my father is from Uttar Pradesh, which is in the north of India. I had several languages spoken at home growing up, and my maternal grandparents and my parents were really interested and had a huge love for music, which fortunately transferred over to me. So I'm quite the mutt, and I wear that badge very proudly, being from various different parts of India, and then also just having learned different types of music or genres of music. I grew up learning to sing North Indian classical music and folk music and devotional songs from my Guruji, who was also the Guruji for the rest of my family. And my family immigrated to the US when I was 8, and I started singing in choirs and taking piano lessons and also South Indian classical vocal lessons. And then I started taking Western classical lessons kind of late. I suppose I was 15 when I started, but I went on to major in vocal performance, and currently I sing with pro choral groups and sing some solo Baroque and Renaissance music, which I love doing that. I've had some really cool forays into music that's an amalgamation of Indian and Western music, and my perspective, I guess, into this discussion is more as a vocalist who has been able to use, I've been able to feel like I've been able to use my training in the different styles and genres of music to enhance my overall vocal performance.
Thank you so much. And our last panelist is Gaurav Sharma.
Hey guys, my name is Gaurav. I'm in New York City as well. I studied music composition, Western music composition at Johns Hopkins. I'm now the COO of JioSaavn, which is the largest music streaming service and platform in India. In addition to, building the streaming platform itself, and working with those groups, I'm very much involved in a lot of our original content efforts. We do a lot of work in terms of trying to support the independent, creator group in India, and try to globalize their content and bring some of their music out to the world. Yeah, that's about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Also, fun fact, we are cousins.
Yes.
Love my musical family. Okay. As we can see, we have some people from pretty much everywhere in the world, every corner of the globe. And the experiences of Indian descent musicians are very complex and varied. So the purpose of this panel discussion is to highlight some of these experiences, show the universality and unity in these art forms, as well as to contextualize them for an audience who may be mostly unfamiliar with mostly familiar with Western music, but unfamiliar to the music of Indians. So I'm going to go through a few questions, and if any questions pop into your head, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to have Q&A at the end, and we can go over these questions then. So without further ado, our first question is, what are some unique perspectives that your identity has brought to your music? So I'm going to first ask, I'm going to ask Gitanjali, do you think, what are some unique perspectives that your identity has brought to your music? I'm going to copy this question in the chat also.
Yeah, I feel like the complex nature of Indian classical music, the ragas, which, simply put, I guess they're somewhat like modes, but then there's a ton more of those than there are modes. And then also the rhythmic cycles, which are called talas. I feel like they really help me when I'm dealing with really complex Western music. I'm able to hear rhythms and intervals in a way that it's not necessarily always required of me as a Western singer. But when it is required, I feel like I'm able to bring that to the table. In Indian music, especially Indian, I think classical music is pretty codified through like oral and oral tradition. And most people a lot of people who perform it professionally are very purist about it, but there's also spaces in the structure of the music where there's space to improvise with various rules in mind. And I feel like that sense of improvisation, because of my training in North Indian classical music, came pretty early to me. And I'm able to transfer it over easily when I sing like Baroque arias, and especially the capo sections. So I really kind of just live for the A prime section of those arias. And finally, I guess because the music is so oral, it helps me really strengthen my ear when maybe notated music can only bring so much, and vice versa. I think there are times when, in order to communicate something from Indian music to another musician who may not be as well versed in it, I feel like I'm extremely comfortable with notated music. And then I'm able to use that notation to relay quickly what the other musician might take, longer to learn orally. So I guess those are some very specifics of things that are unique perspectives for me as a singer.
Absolutely. I've definitely felt the same way about early music, kind of speaking to me in a way that Indian music also does. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Okay, what about you, Preeti? What are some unique perspectives that your identity has brought to your music? I know being a composer might be a little bit different.
Well, the thing is, I got trained as a pianist. So because my mom taught me piano, so I actually grew up on Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart, so all the sort of classical composers. And then I also grew up on orchestral stuff, so a lot of Russian, because I mean, I don't know if you know, but Russian music is really well respected in India for some odd reason. Maybe it's the distance, it's the geographical closeness. But composers like Rimsky-Korsakov, Khachaturian, Borodin, all those sort of Russian composers. So they had a huge influence on my orchestral style in a way. And it was really, they're quite flashy. They're quite sort of bombastic in a way. And I found that very interesting, but so different from the sort of more meditative Indian classical ragas where harmony doesn't change. You have the same tonal chords all the way through. So for me, the challenge was introducing, so actually I first wrote very Western style music. So I wrote orchestral pieces, I wrote piano pieces, which are very orchestral style. It was only later on that I started to think, how do I incorporate the sort of Indian raga embellishment type music into mine? And so it was really a question of how I use transposition, how I use chords, harmonies with a sort of more modal technique. So that was quite a journey. And then obviously with my own ensemble Shivanova, that was very interesting because the Indian musicians, we used to conduct, and the Indian musicians did not know what a 4-beat bar was. So there I would be standing in front of them doing this, and they had no idea. So I really had to go back to basics and say, when, I say start, when I give you the cue, start. And so just the performance part of it and the rehearsal and bringing musicians together from Western and Indian was quite a culture clash initially. And then they each had to learn about different traditions and how they work. So it's been a long journey.
Definitely. Thank you. So, an uncle, I know that you're someone who really lives music, even though it's your profession as a vet. In your home life, music is just everywhere. It's something I've grown up with, and it's something you also bring to the temple, to your religion in the temple. So, do you think you could speak on that a little bit? Oh, you are muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, right from the beginning, I grew up in a railway colony. In India, there's a big culture of neighborhood. We know each and every person by name, first name, their families, whatnot. So anyway, my mom was part of this religious singing group. So I was accompanying her, playing little dholak and this and that. And then I came to this country, but that feeling continued. Professionally, I became a veterinarian. Then all of a sudden there was an opening for a singer in the temple, which was volunteer singer. And I took over, not only started singing the bhajans or religious songs, I started to talk also a little bit spirituality or humanity or whatever it was. But it had a very, very strong reciprocal effect on me that my personality, which I had as a singer, religious singer, got improved 100 times just because of the presence of people in audience listening to you and their reaction to the music, their reaction to the prayers they come with. And if I suppose sang a bhajan or something that touched their heart, you see them crying. And same is true for us as a singer too. When you are really into the mode of singing with full passion towards especially the bhajans or religious songs, sometimes it's hard even to sing. Your eyes well up, your throat chokes up. And the same is true in churches I have seen. One thing I say about music and life and religion is you go to any church when it's all empty. It's your faith only that you see, that you bow down to the God there. When go there in any temple or church or mosque or any gurdwara, when it is full of music, it's life in there. Everything becomes so alive, and that is the energy of this music. And I think that's the biggest blessing if somebody can really experience it and have it in their life. That really enriches us. So that religious singing, obviously, you have to, if you're standing on a stage singing as a religious person, you have to be acting like that too in real life. You can't be two different personalities. You have to be a pure person to be able to sit in front of the public and on the seat to be saying something. So anyway, that part was very, very big on me. I always loved music. One more thing I want to share here about Indian music versus Western music. Grew up in India purely, but one time we got introduced into this Western music cassettes, Bonnie M, Night Flight to Venus, and a couple of other, those 1970s songs, which were very rich. I mean, very famous songs from Indian music mindset. Now, these songs, these melodies, they got us. We loved it. I probably heard these songs 100 times each. So it's universal. I'm sure a lot of Americans and people who are from other countries, they listen to Indian music also, and slowly, it's a learned language. Your brain starts, seeing that melodies. They enjoy those things. That's it.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Gaurav, what do you have to say about this question? Some unique perspectives your identity has brought to your music.
Yeah, well, first I'll start off by saying I think my perspective is probably a little different. I grew up on popular Western music. I studied the Western music industry. Although Indian classical music was something that was always playing in my home growing up, my sensibility was always, I was a huge hip hop fan, big Stevie Wonder fan, and that really shaped my perspective of content. And even as I was in college, the content I myself developed and composed was very kind of Western pop, indie R&B type content. Through the music that I develop or help develop today and the artists that we aim to support and work with on our original content, I've definitely brought that sort of Western perspective to the at least the Indian pop content that we make. One example is so like I mentioned, I grew up a huge rap fan. There was a Bollywood film a couple of years ago called Gully Boy that was coming out. And their musical director for the film is this composer Ankur Tiwari, who composes a lot of very interesting Bollywood content for many different films. But they wanted this to kind of be true to Western sensibilities. The film was actually about a local Mumbai rapper who lived in the slums that was, I guess, working towards an opportunity to open for the rapper Nas, who was having a concert in Bombay. And it's actually based on an actual person, a Mumbai rapper named Divine, who was one of the first artists that we ever worked with way back in the day. Part of what Savin does is we really invest in like independent artists that don't really have a label or a film studio tie-up, and we really try to support them. Ironically, this film ended up being about one of the artists that we've supported for a while. And the plot kind of revolved around this rapper Nas, who was a rapper that I grew up listening to. So this project in particular was a really cool way to kind of, really kind of attach my own perspective to kind of the content that was being played in the film, as well as the music that was recorded for the film. And the last scene of the film, the rapper gets on stage to ultimately be able to open for Nas. And we were able to put together a really cool song that actually featured the rapper the film was about, Divine, and Nas, and then also the actor that was acting in the film. And it was just a cool experience, because I don't know if, especially on the mainstream Bollywood, a traditional Bollywood stage, you'd ever kind of imagine, like rap emulating, Queens, New York, right? Like where Nas is from. And like, I think that very much speaks to my experience, my perspective, and also just the perspective of the team that I work with. We're all music obsessed, but we don't really like to think that or believe that, at least from the pop sensibility that or the Bollywood sensibility, that Indian content can't be influenced by Western content. So that's one example for me, but we kind of take that to all of the content that we do. And we try to do a lot of collaborations with various artists from different cultures. In fact, we have a song that just came out a couple of days ago, that features 3 artists. One is a Hindi singer, Arman Malik. The second is actually a Korean singer, Eric Nam. And the third is I guess beige, I never heard, but half Indian, half white, electronic producer from California who's pretty successful, named Kashmir. And it's a very interesting track, because it's 3 different cultures melding together, and that's pretty much what my perspective was growing up. So it's cool to be able to make content like that professionally.
I love that. Thank you so much. Also, yes, I will be using beige from now on. Thank you, Joshua. And Joshua, last but not least, what are some unique perspectives that your identity has brought to your music?
For me, it's as much cultural as anything else, because I've been only active in Western music, although I was educated about half by an Indian rock star. And my work in church music brought me into contact with both North and South Indian Christian practices, which exist in this kind of peculiar space between Indian classical music temple chants and Western classical. I just got sent, my colleague in Bombay just sent me a South Indian worship chant called Saranam, for setting as an organ piece in Western style. So I've been very connected with worship traditions, even though I write mostly in a Western style. And the understanding of large rhythmic chunks, which come from Indian classical music, but permeate Western classical, so that you can understand a Beethoven scherzo, just to pick a movement out of the air, as a series of large rhythmic units in the way of an Indian improvisation. So it kind of underpins all my understanding. And because I've worked as an organist quite a bit, it underpins this sense of improvisation, which explores over the course of a long time, even though, I'm stuck with semitones, I'm stuck with a chromatic scale, I can explore them over half an hour or 45 minutes, the way that in India, somebody might explore something for a raga for an hour or two. Chromaticism is a little more boring, but anyway, that's my answer for you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So our second question is, what are some of your more interesting or formative experiences navigating within or between Western and Indian music circles? So the first person, Priti, why don't you talk about your experiences with that?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned some of those, the sort of influence of Russian music in India, because I was, I was in India till I was in my mid-20s. So a lot of what I heard in India really, really sort of, has become the basis of a lot of what I, have continued to write. So you'd hear the mosque, you'd hear the namaz, you call for the namaz in the mosque very often. You'd hear the temple music, and everybody has speakers. All the gurdwaras, all the temples in India have huge speakers, so there'd be a clash of music. So you'd drive down a street and you'd have so many different types of music. The shops would be blaring music, so there was so much music on the streets. It's amazing. And then of course the festivals in India, you have Holi and everybody comes out with the dhol, and you have the dhols, you have the bhangra music. So all of this in a funny way permeates through you. It's sort of, it's there at the back of you. And in the meantime, my mum was practicing at home. She was giving broadcasts, so she would be practicing sometimes for 6-7 hours on the piano. She would be playing Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Liszt, Rachmaninoff, so all the piano composers. So I'd have that in the house. And then my dad he was a scientist, but he was so into Mahler. He was really into the orchestral music, and he is the one who introduced me to Prokofiev, to all the sort of Russian composers, and Mendelssohn, so some of the big orchestral sounds. So through all this, I remember when I was writing my initial pieces, it was so much music. I really had to start to simplify all my influences. And when I came to the UK, it was really a question of simplifying all of that. And of course, when I went to the conservatoire, there was, I'm sure all of you went through this, the 12-tone serial music. So I had to go through that. I had to study Schoenberg and Berg and Webern, and so all the sort of, and Stockhausen. So I studied all the sort of European sort of serialist, and I rejected it, but I had to write it to reject it. And so I came out at the other end really wanting to explore my Indian roots. But I knew I had a background and I could not ignore it, a background of Western orchestral and piano music. So I think those two influences really, they are the bedrock of my music. And gradually I started to filter other bits of music in, like tango, which I really love, salsa rhythms, Latin rhythms, but you know, they sort of form a layer sometimes within the music, really. So and I'm continuously learning, I'm continuously exploring with world music. There's so much out there. I love the African rhythms, I really do. You know, the sort of marimbas and the kalimbas, and when they combine to form layers of rhythm, that really interests me. And I just think, you know, it'd be interesting to combine that with lots of Indian percussion, have all those layers on there to form a real sort of sound, a wall of rhythmic sound from all those. So yes, it's been a continuous sort of exploration, really. It doesn't stop.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Gitanjali, how about you? What are some interesting or formative experiences that you've had?
Yeah, I was gonna also say to what Priti was saying. I really love some of the things you said, because there's some cultures that I consider really like old cultures. They've just been around for a long time, and it's really interesting I was talking to somebody who's from Brazil recently, and she was saying something which was very similar to what you said, that she was saying in Brazil music is just on the streets. She was saying it's big and it's bold, and I feel like that with India as well. Whether it's the barat of a wedding, whether it's a festival that's going on, and there's one like every week. I love it. And just that boldness and of music that's just on the streets wherever you're going. It's there in your head and your heart, whether you know it or not. And then the other thing you said, which is so great, about all these influences that we have, and then at some point, you start to realize you have to sift through them to see, who are you, where does that hone in. And loved hearing about how you kind of came out the other end and realized that you couldn't ignore your roots. And I guess as far as some of my influence, my interesting experiences, a few years ago I performed this piece called Kala Chakra, which means cycles of time, and it was by this composer named Shirish Korde, who lives in Boston. And the vocal line was very disjunct and really fast, and the text was all bowls, which are basically sounds that a tabla would make, right? And so they're nonsense syllables, but they sound like tarekita, dimitaka, things that a tabla would sound like. And so it was, the instrumentation was also, along with voice, it was tabla, marimba, various other percussion instruments and stringed instruments. And it was supposed to go really, really fast, because a tabla can go really fast. And so it was challenging and incredibly fun piece for me, because usually bowls are not sung and they're spoken. So I had to kind of get that aspect of me where it's like, okay, this is more modern music, but it's also very traditional, because there's a tabla that's playing with me, and it's doing all of those things, and I hear it, and it's like, that's the Indian part of me that I know and recognize, and then there's all these notes that are kind of all over the place. So I felt like at some point with something like that, you just have to you need to feel the rhythm and feel the speech and the vocal memory of it in your body. You can't necessarily just read the music only. You do that initially to learn it, and it, gosh, thank God I had that. But I felt like all of my training, kind of helped me prepare to bring out that mixed Indian and Western essence of that piece. And going back to also what Joshua had said about the rhythm and the complicatedness of the rhythm, and how you can expand that into Western classical piece and say, well, we're seeing this in a measure, but what if you expand it further? I mean, kind of like the Schenkerian analysis of something, right? And And then there was another time, well, recently I performed just quite a simple Indian lullaby in a show that I had produced last year. And my conductor was going to play the psaltery with it, but he doesn't know the lullaby, and it would have taken him a little while to be able to pick up, just even a very simple chord 1-5 plucked on it, just because he didn't know the lullaby, and we just didn't have very much time for him to learn it. So that's just something very simple where, okay, well, I know how to write Western notation. I'm not a composer like you are, Priti, or Joshua. You do your different arrangements, but I do. I was like, okay, well, I can write this out. And the other thing with that was that he was not a virtuoso psaltery player, and I had to also keep in mind that he was like, I can only do diatonic notes. So I was like, okay, well, fortunately, it's a diatonic lullaby. So, anyway, just saying that, okay, I was able to write that down for him, and he was able to learn it much faster than he would have had I said, hey, I don't know how to do this. You just have to learn it by ear, and then we may not have been able to do it. So, that was like the knowing Western classical musical notation helped me to communicate Indian music to another colleague so that we could perform that lullaby together.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've been really searching for, is as musicians, how can we all communicate on an intellectual level with each other, even though the type of music that we create is so different. And I mean, you just have to go to the heart of what makes people want to perform music, that someone uncle mentioned a little earlier. But thank you. So, Joshua, what about you? What are some interesting or formative experiences for you?
I mean, the main thing I'm thinking about right now is my uncle is a rocker, as I mentioned, and we were doing a backing track this is a vanity project for a friend of mine. We're doing wise men say only fools. I can't help falling in love with you. There we go. I knew I'd remember if I sang it. But my uncle does not read Western notation for the most part, even though he grew up in a choir school in India. He was trying to express to me that he wanted something in a triplet, followed by 16ths. So he's going back and forth. He's trying to explain it. He plays it a couple of times. Finally, he looks over and says, "Takita takadnimi." I went, "Oh, okay." Because that was available to him from his deep youth in a way that notation wasn't. That's about it. I mean, it's funny to work in church music as much as I have, because some of the Christian music in India that I've worked with is so Anglophilic that they forget that there is, other music in India. Yeah.
Thank you. That's so interesting. Just okay. What about you, Suman uncle? What are some interesting or formative experiences that you've had? Especially, I know you've talked a little bit about your mom teaching you music. If you could go in just talk about some of your experiences. I think you're muted.
Yes. So anyway, in a non-technically trained musician, I think we live by our mind, our life, our soul, our whatever feelings are. It's a very age bound, starting when you're a very little kid to when you mature up to the age. There are different timings of the music you experience, which really touch you. I remember as a kid, it was a rainy, rainy day, and my mom had gone to see her parents. And I was feeling so lonely and crying to a song on the radio, Bedardi Balma Tujhko Mera Man Yaad Karta Hai. I don't know why in the world that particular piece of music was making me cry over and over and over. So that was one touching. Second was when I grew up, we were in this festive, in a youth festival in college. And in people who know Punjabi Bhangra, so that dhol and then people singing with it really captures your mind. You feel very strong and energetic. And then I was attending my niece's wedding in the early morning when the departure of the bride is. That particular music they played, these band people, that makes everybody cry. So it touches you at different part. Then I'm in a temple. I went to this Hare Krishna temple the other day. This guy was singing Indian bhajan in Western style because he's raised in ISKCON, in Hare Rama Hare Krishna lifestyle. But that touches you. You lose your own state of mind. You forget where you are. So to me, I think if music isn't in you and you love music, it can touch you any part of that. Another experience was recently. My son got married. You were there, am I right, Muskan? So this guy who was just playing a simple dhol, this big dhol, with 2 sticks on each side. He made it so intense, just with the sticks playing that dhol, that it really captivated me like for no tomorrow. I don't know how and what got me. No lyrics, no melody, just him playing that beat. So it can be very intense in any situation, whatever your mind is engraved with the notes or not engraved with the notes, but they can really capture you. The rhythms can capture you, like this what's his name, who produced all the latest Indian drum music for Lagan movie and other A.R. Rahman. He has used the drums in one of the best, very innovative way to touch, even before the melody starts, that captivates you. It's amazing. So I think it also depends, as I said, as you mature, your taste changes, your things change, but all these memories are great there always. And music is a big part of my life personally. Thank you.
No, thank you. And last but not least for this question, Gaurav, what are some of your most interesting or formative experiences?
Yeah, for me, probably, well, let me rewind a little bit. So for popular Indian content, Bollywood is kind of the king still, even though the overall market share of Bollywood has been going down dramatically over the last 5 or 6 years. But one interesting experience that's kind of stuck with me was a project where our goal was to create a modern classic Bollywood song, not tied to a film. But we wanted to create an interesting music video, and we wanted to see if we could create like a modern classic Bollywood song and have it cross over globally, in the same sense that kind of Latin music has been able to cross over globally, in even US pop radio or even India for that matter. So that was the goal of the project. And so we took kind of a data-driven approach to A&R, where we took a big Bollywood composer, this guy Arijit Singh, and we looked at all of his fans, and he's a very prolific composer and producer, and has so many different songs and for so many different films. But we wanted to understand of his fan base if there were other subgenres and other artists that might be fit for an interesting collaboration. And we stumbled upon this one electronic DJ from America who also had a pretty big following, whose name is Marshmello. And we got to, I'm gonna put up a picture here. We got to do a pretty cool, pretty interesting studio session where I didn't really know what to expect, but all these different Indian composers and artists come in. completely unannounced. So you got like Indian rappers, this guy Badshah, obviously, I mean, you got Arijit, you know, all these various composers that wanted to come in and just collaborate and see about how they could, you know, put together oh, I'm sorry, by the way, the composer is Pritham, but Arijit Singh was singing on the song, sorry. So so we thought about like various ways to collaborate and create almost like a crossover Western and Bollywood track. We even got Marshmello to learn how to play the dole. And it was a interesting experience for me because while we put out this interesting music video that was like paying an homage to SRK, and you know, you guys should check out the video. It's called Biba. The coolest thing was I was in America a month later. We had done all of this in Mumbai. I was in America a month later, and there was a music festival going on in Miami called Ultra, and Marshmello was performing there. And I started noticing Indian flags in this like massive sea of people at one of the most major music festivals in the country when Marshmello was performing. And I thought that was actually, now the song didn't become a smash hit, but it did like reasonably well. But the biggest part of it was that we were actually globalizing the content through music, and just globalizing the culture through music. So that was a really cool experience. The other one I'll just mention because we were playing the song at the beginning, but we did this project with U2 and A.R. Rahman called Ahimsa. We really didn't have anything to do with the composition of that. So whereas with the Marshmello thing, it was very hands-on. We actually got to be part of the like the multiple sessions and aligning on lyrics and the overall composition, and teaching Chris, who's Marshmello, just even, you know, Pritham teaching him some of the chord progressions and sensibilities for Bollywood. With U2 and A.R. Rahman, it was just an interesting experience insofar as they, you know, Bono and A.R. Rahman are masters at their craft, and it really didn't take much coaching. I don't think they would have accepted it anyway. But just being able to experience what they created, and then they did like a pretty incredible show in Mumbai. It was U2's first time ever performing in India, and just being able to watch that performance and be at least a little bit of a part of that track and the production of it is definitely an experience that I'll never forget.
Thank you so much. As we can see, the experiences and the music that Indians create is so diverse, and it just intersects with the Western music and just all types of music in so many different ways. So I think that leads into our last question of the evening, which is, what is one thing that you wish people to know about the music of Indians? How about you go first, Joshua? What is one thing you wish people to know about the music of Indians?
You know, this is the one question I could not come up with a decent answer to, because I want them to know everything, right? Which I realize that is a completely crap answer. But for real, I think I want people to know how rich and how varied our music is, and that it's not as simple as to say, you know, one little slice of it. But just as we've seen in the last 20 minutes, it goes all over the spectrum. It's as easy to say, what do you want people to know of the music of Europe? Right? So yeah, I want them to know all of it. Sorry, terrible answer.
No, I love it. No, that's a great answer. Okay, what about you, Suman Uncle? What is one thing that you wish people would know about the music of Indians? I'm so sorry, you're muted.
I was just doing research on Wikipedia right now a minute ago, and Indian music is the oldest music in the world. And music is part of all the cultures in the world. Amazingly, if you look at the construction of all the musical instruments we had in the past, in the very, very old instruments, they are very improvised pieces. For example, drums could be 1,000 shapes, 1,000 looks. Just look at tabla alone. How many sounds and combinations you create out of it with left and right side of it. So it's a very, very evolved music in the world. The world need to know. And music as such is impression and expression, as I call it. Impression is what you feel environmentally, physically, mentally, in the family, and expression is how you produce it out. And in impressions comes the seasons, comes the pain, anger, you talk about it. Same is true in Western music too. But our ragas, the way they were composed, they were meant to express certain things at certain time of the day, certain time of the month, certain time of the year or a season or whatnot. But I think the newer generation, or the generation like Gaurav said earlier, the Bollywood trained Indian generation, or the common Western music, listeners to the pop and whatever, I don't know all the descriptions on them. There is a lot of melody plus a lot of verbal, language that impresses the people. But in ragas, it's just the pure notes without any lyrics and words. You can express a lot of things. You can express the whole, like he said, some people can sing one raga whole night. And you have to have audience to be able to listen to that too. But that's the extreme of music composition. So that's what I want people to know. Yes, it's very, very deep. The taste changes, because of the people having time or whatever, they have or not. Taste changes with the age also and with the era we live in. But sometimes you can always tap back to those gigantic resources of the music origin or music compositions and dwell upon it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can tell.
Definitely. And also, just looking at the time, I do want to ask everyone this question, but if we can keep it to a little bit shorter so we can have some time for Q&A. Slated end time of this is in a little bit over 15 minutes, 3:15 Pacific Standard Time. So the next person I'm going to ask, Gitanjali, what is one thing that you would wish people to know about the music of India?
I think very similar to what you were saying, Joshua, is that so I guess my answer is stupid too, but that it's not just one thing. It is just so many things. And I mean, it's not just Bollywood, but it's also Bollywood, because if you look at Bollywood, it takes from so many other things within Indian and within other genres of music outside of India, which is pretty much what you're doing, Gaurav, right? And it's, I guess, since this is an ACDA panel, I'll kind of also talk about sometimes what I've seen is as diverse as Indian music is, there's this idea that sometimes we want to put one piece into a concert that we're giving that's like, hey, here's my one Indian piece and you know how to do this. And, it's like this token piece. I mean, how many times have I performed in a concert where it's all European white guys' music, and then at the very end, the encore is a spiritual, it's rousing spiritual. I mean, it's happened a lot. I've done it too, I've been in performances like that. But I guess I would say that I wonder if we can expand ourselves and think about how to find, just to try to find a way to create more of a cohesiveness in the program that does include Indian music, so that it's not just like, one kind of off the road, one little thing, and hey, I did this, check mark kind of thing. Whereas, and perhaps to learn more about the type of Indian music you want to do, because there's not just one kind of Indian music. Like Suman was saying, ragas also are not just 1,000 different combinations of notes. There's also something called rasa, which means the emotion of each raga is there. And so, which is why we have ragas in the afternoon or the evening. And, you know, I guess with that, in that way, it would perhaps take a little bit more time to talk to composers who've been composing with Indian music as their influence. Perhaps it would be a little bit more detailed rehearsal and knowledge for the performers. But I think overall that would create for a more heartfelt and authentic performance, and a way for oneself to find kind of more deeply learning about different genres instead of kind of on the surface. And then I feel like that's something that, you know, then in the future, one could be more comfortable in knowing how to grow into that when we do more performances. And so I just think that the main thing is there's not just one thing about Indian music. It's not only devotional. It's not only, it's all of that, and then it's so much more. And it's evolving, and there's parts of Indian music that, you know, don't evolve, and then there's other parts that do evolve. And I think it's like us. It's like people, and that's what music is. I think we're vessels, and when music comes through us, it changes us, and it changes as well. Which is why, you know, of course I want to do what's written on the page because that's what the composer asked for it. But why is my performance different than another singer's performance? And it will be, right? So, and that's the beauty of it. And that's the same thing with Indian music. There's so much going on, and I think people would be excited to learn more about it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And just another reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the chat for the Q&A that's in a few minutes. So Priti, what was the question again? Oops. What is one thing that you wish people to know about the music of Indians?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I agree with what Joshua said and what Gitanjali said and what Suman uncle has said. You know, the diversity in Indian music is absolutely fantastic, and you know, it's to be. I mean, well, we're 1.5 billion people, and we've got such a huge diaspora in America, UK, all over. So you know, it's going to happen. It's going to be as you know, you combine different cultures, you combine different voices, you're going to get, and the variety is going to grow in the future. It's really going to grow. I mean, I just coming back to when I came to the UK, and you'd walk into an Indian restaurant, you'd hear what's called sitar music, and all the English just associated Indian music with sitar music, which was Ravi Shankar. So for them, it was like Indian music started and stopped at Ravi Shankar, and there was nothing beyond that. So the moment they had the sitar, it was like, yeah, we're in India, you know. It was like the Taj Mahal and Ravi Shankar, two things, and that was it. And now, you know, the journey, the Bollywood that's come up in the UK. I mean, the number of people who enjoy Bollywood, the number of people who enjoy Indian rap, it's just burgeoned up. I mean, the Bhangra, the underground, the Asian underground music in the UK, all of that, the rap, the reggae, it's just, you know, multiplied. And I think that's the influence is, I mean, the younger generation are going to have all this to be able to create and, you know, and just produce so much diversity. And I think, you know, it's just interesting in the classical sector. I don't think we South Asians actually, you know, sort of promote our own music as much as we should. We're sort of slightly not as confident when it comes to promoting our own music and promoting the variety and the diversity of music, which is why you get programs of mainly white classical composers, mainly male, and you don't get it because we ourselves don't promote it. And I think that's the next step. We need to promote music of our own, you know, sort of musicians, of our own composers, and we need to take that, you know, it's a responsibility we all have. So, but with that, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And last but not least for this question, Gaurav, what is one thing that you wish people to know about the music of Indian?
Well, I just want to echo what everyone's saying. I think it's so true that you know, Indian content is evolving. We should be prideful of all the genres and subgenres that are you know, that are existing today. And I do also, just to echo what Preeti is saying, that the UK scene specifically for independent South Asian artists is booming. And there's so much interesting creative coming out of there. But for India specifically, there are the one kind of technical thing I would want everyone to kind of realize is that there is a democratization of music that's occurring in India that actually has to do with publishing rights. So previous to 2012, you know, the labels and which are the film studios would own all of the basically sound recording rights, performing rights, publishing rights of all the content that any artist were to perform on any of their, you know, records or whatever, which made every artist basically, you know, composing as a work for hire basis, which like very much kind of like hurts the ability for these artists to make a living. Now it's not perfect yet, but the IPRS, which is the publishing rights organization in India, as of 2012 does exist. Now writers, composers can no longer waive or assign their rights to for their music publishing rights to a label. But to date, there's no system in place to help these artists still like really maximize these revenue streams as that exists in the Western industry. Music publishing obviously is huge from a revenue standpoint. And so I think what's happening today is with things like YouTube and streaming platforms and all the new things like Patreon and all these new platforms that are creating you know, revenue streams for artists. Artists in India are able to, you know, make a living, even if you're just starting out. And I think over time, that's going to lead to further democratization of the content. Now you can go on YouTube, you can go on Spotify, you can go on Saavn, and independent artists' content are right up there with the Bollywood content. Bollywood used to be the playlist. It used to be the only way that people would find popular content. So I think, yeah, I think the one thing to know about India is that, you know, things are finally moving in the right direction for artists from a revenue standpoint, which is very, very important.
That is so interesting. I once on the phone you started talking about this, and it's like this is a world I have no idea about, but it's so fascinating.
Publishing didn't even exist 10 years ago, which is nuts.
Oh wow. Okay, so that's it for our questions, but if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the chat for our Q&A, which starts now. So our first Q&A question is, who are a few of your favorite Indian/Indian diaspora musicians that we should check out if we're interested in expanding our listening if we don't know many? Anyone has any that they want to talk about?
I mean, I would just say like Ritviz is a pretty cool Indian kind of independent composer that sings, makes his own productions, very global, but also very rooted in kind of like Indian composition sensibilities. So that would be my suggestion.
Anyone else have any suggestions?
I can send a whole list if people want. But
you could put it in the event, like just comment all your suggestions. I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of Indian composers just that I've encountered in that Facebook group, and like you know, I've sung Priti's music recently. I sang one of her songs. I recently sang an art song by the composer Hamaara Sangeet, and her music is really good. There's just tons, and it's just really amazing music out there. Oh, it looks like Gitanjali and then Joshua.
I was going to say there's also like a ton of bands in India as well that are coming up. So there's a Malayali one called Avial, and that's the name of a dish. Everything's about food in India, food and music. We love food and music. So anyway, it's called Avial. It's spelled Avial. Kind of a rock band. And then like here, I mean, of course, y'all probably know Rina Smail and her music. And I like seeing some of her interviews as well, just because you get to see kind of where the influence for maybe like even a specific piece comes from. I think that's always cool, like to hear about that from composers, you know, like in a way that you might not learn just when you buy a piece of music and there's like one page of, you know, who they are in their bio in the front. So she has some interviews on YouTube and stuff. And so I feel like she's, you know, somebody who's just being true to herself, her Indian roots, but also her Western roots. So.
Yes, she has a song cycle. I'm not remembering the name of it, but I'm considering one of the songs from the cycle called Juta. It's beautiful. It's with piano and Indian voice. I'm considering it for my senior recital. It's just beautiful. I love listening to it anyways. I think Joshua, you wanted to also comment about this question.
Oh, I was just going to say that's the Gaurav's idea. Great. We should actually just build up a list by genre so that we have this to throw at people and boast, because every time I'm asked that question, I have a different answer. Right now, I'm thinking of Vijay Isha, who's in Harlem, a block from where I live, right? And he's a fabulous jazz pianist, you know, with a particularly Indian style. But there must be 300 more people who I want you all to know. And of course, I can only think of Vijay at the moment.
I'll put together that database, don't worry. We can all work on it together. Okay, this is from Priti, and it's to Gaurav. Why is the market share of Bollywood going down?
Because independent artists are putting out more content. 10 years ago, the #1 most downloaded app on the Mac's like app store or whatever was GarageBand, which was just indicative of the fact that people were recording their own content and starting to make music. And yeah, I mean, it's just something that we've kind of noticed in our data. Bollywood used to be 95% of our streams. It's now around 65%. And there's just a massive base of so many different genres. You can't even just call it independent. They're just other genres, and to speak to the diversity that you guys were all talking about.
Mm-hmm. And I have one question for my sister too, Gaurav. Have you? Yes, I'm going to embarrass you, Radhika. Have you seen Marshmallow's face?
Yes. His name's Chris.
I love that. Okay, this is a question from Orlando. What is the possibility that Indian music will be taught in our colleges like jazz or Latin American music? Interesting. Priti, go ahead.
Well, it already is. I think in a couple of colleges in the UK, you can choose Indian music. In fact, Leeds College of Music, you can take a degree. And it's been linked to a Sangeet Natak Academy degree in India, Delhi. So there are two. There's the Madras one or the Chennai one, and then there's the Delhi one. So you can actually take a full course on Indian classical music in Leeds. And also Dartington has a summer school where you can learn Indian classical. So it's coming. It's coming. I mean, it's not in the conservatories yet, but I think other colleges are now linking up with universities in India to be able to produce that, mainly because the South Asian diaspora in the UK is quite vocal now. It's quite big, and people are wanting to do this. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure in the next 10 years there'll be more demand for that as well.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to add that Hindu University in America, which I think is a very recent university, a friend of mine actually works there. I think they've been having classes on Indian music. You know, so I definitely in America too. I noticed Joshua, you wanted to also speak, so go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say Leeds. So Priti got there first.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else? Go ahead, Gitanjali.
Well, I was just going to quickly say what Priti had said before, which is, at least in the US, I feel like maybe it's something to do with marketing it, and that's up to us.
Oh, 100%. I know that there's some colleges, some universities in the U.S. that I know that they have Indian ensembles. Like I think that UC Davis actually has one. There's a few, so I know they're out there. So we have one more question. Do you have advice for young kids to what young do you have advice for young kids to work and still stay with music? This might be a good question for you, Suman Uncle, because that's exactly what you do.
Well, music can be anytime with you nowadays with the mobile phones and whatnot. All the content is available. Yes, but to be a dedicated musician, yes, you have to devote time. I believe it's same time frame is same true for any form of music you learn. It's not something comes very quickly like riding a bicycle. No, it's a very complex system, complex language, and rhythms and sounds and productions and whatnot. But it can be done. Yes, most of us done. Like I'm a veterinarian by profession. But do I find time for music to sing? You bet. I love to play, and you have to dedicate also. Imagine 20 years every Tuesday being in the temple from 7 to 9. It's a dedication, am I right? But I feel rewarded for it, and anybody can do anything. It's all the passion you have to have. Simple.
Mm-hmm. Gitanjali?
I was going to say, from my own background, I did degrees in music performance, and I did a master's and a performance diploma, but then I also did like minors in computer science and in math because my parents. And but though I say that, but at the same time, I the math stuff, I loved it. That was something I wanted to do, and I'm glad I did that because I was a math TA in college that paid for my master's and while I was doing the math TA. But I kind of went in the other direction, I guess, than Suman Uncle after I graduated, which is that I continued with music. And I mean, it's like you were saying, it's like anything, it's a lot of hard work, and there's not, I think the scary thing is there's not like a set path necessarily, but it's also what makes it beautiful. I think that there's not a set path, like 10 or 15 years ago, you can say that you could be a professional pro choral singer. You could that didn't exist. You couldn't go from city to city having a gig this week with this group that was singing choral music and then going to another one. That wasn't the case, and just in the last like 10 years or so, even 15 years, I mean, it's boomed. So in that way, the opportunities, because it's not just one path that you can take, are also great. You just kind of have to, like Priti was saying, you have to sift through to figure out who you are, where you are, and that can change, and that's okay, because I think it changes for people with careers that are not in music as well. So
Yes, absolutely. And I just wanted to say we're technically out of time. So if anyone has to go, thank you so much for coming. But we still do have some questions in the chat if anyone wants to stick around and we can answer them. But yeah.
I wanted to quickly chime in on the last question though, just, at least from my side, because I know a lot of people, are studying music and all of that. I studied music myself, and I also just came to the realization that while I loved it, I wasn't like great. I felt like I had a huge interest in it, but I knew so many people that were way better than me. And maybe I could have put in the time to really get there, but it at least developed an interest in me to then try to see, okay, are there other ways to get involved in music and impact music outside of just composing? So I think that opportunity is there for everyone as well. You can still impact music and culture in other ways.
Can I just add to it something? Gaurav, you have made me so much proud. I can't tell you enough. Aside from that,
Thanks,
you know, there's no set path for anybody in any profession. You could be a doctor and then become engineer. You could have another degree and all of a sudden you find your music is your passion. And a lot of people I know, it's sad and happy both. Sad because if somebody just want to be an artist only, don't know if he's gonna make enough living out of it or not. That's the sad part about it. But on the other hand, you know, you could have multiple what do you call that? Multiple professions in you, multiply, you know, talented in music and instrumental or singing and whatnot. And who knows when the opportunity knocks at your door? Never know. But the smartest thing what I hear back from you, Gaurav, that knowing that in music there's so much competition, so much better artists and whatnot. But it is the personal intelligence to carve your way and, you know, dictate your, you know, way through all these things and say, you know what, I want to be a success. And you're a beautiful example of that, I tell you. And for everybody else who's a listener, yeah, keep in your hand multiple, you know, disciplines of life. Never know which discipline will shine for you. That's an uncle advice, okay? Everybody's calling me uncle now.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I love that this is just like a little family reunion in addition to meeting some really, really wonderful people. Okay, so we have one question in the chat. Many years ago, I wanted to learn how to play sitar and bought one, but couldn't find an instructor, so I gave it to my brother. I'd love to see more instrumental education offered to Westerners in the future. Do you think we'd see more instrumental education offered in the US in the future?
Come to the UK. There's sitar teachers here, there's tabla teachers here, there's sarangi teachers, there's any teacher you want, they're here. So there's even mridangam teachers, there's ghatam teachers, mridangam, veena, sarods, the whole lot, they're here. So I don't know what it is, but maybe because the UK is such a small country, they all sort of, you know, there's big, but we do have teachers here, but I'm sure in California there must be sitar teachers. I mean, there's the whole Zakir Hussain clan of and there's Vijayat Khan he was teaching somewhere in Berkeley, so there must be.
I know there are quite a few in the Bay Area at least. Gitanjali, you wanted to answer this?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, you know, my mom plays sitar and she lived in Indiana. So, you know, not California or New York. But, and if you wanted to find her as a sitar teacher, you wouldn't be able to go online and find her. But if you knew people in the Indian community, then you asked them, then they would. And I have a feeling that it's possible that there are people who are teachers like that. If you could kind of, you know, whoever asked this question, but if you're able to find like a way, I don't know, through Indian grocery stores where there's like ads or something like that, just find a way into like finding a community of Indians locally, then it's possible just through word of mouth, you may be able to find somebody who does that. And because there may not be people who have decided that that's their profession, but they might be good enough to be able to teach you, you know, especially if you're starting off and you're like, oh, I just bought the sitar and I just want to learn, you know, maybe they might not be able to take you to a level where like you're performing like Ravi Shankar on stage or Anushka or something, but you know, yeah.
I think temple and gurudwaras is another place they can go and look into. Yeah.
Are we planning a startup in the chat?
All right.
Looks like it.
I love that. So if anyone has any more questions.
Thank you very much. I gotta go, Muskan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, but I have to go to work one time, okay?
Okay. Thank you so much. I think this was a good point to end it. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for the wonderful panelists for just a wonderful conversation that we had here. Really, really enlightening for everyone, including for me. and I hope our paths cross, especially family. I really, really do hope our paths cross. But yeah, thank you, and I hope you all have a nice night.
Great
Thank
job,
you,
Muskan.
Muskan. Very impressive. I've been really, really very interesting discussion. Extremely could carry on talking for the next hour or so on all of this. So, really well done.
Yeah, thank
Well
you.
done,
Thank you to
Muskan.
all
We
the
are
other
very proud of
panelists.
you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you, Muskan.
Bye.
Thank you.
And thanks,
Bye.
everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all as well.
Nice to-
Yes, same here.
Come to the UK.